can't do the little jobs. He didn't say that. He said the man who does the little job well is the man to trust with the big jobs. So usually the circle that people go in is to say that I found an inerrant Bible, so I believed. Then I found some mistakes, and I decided these weren't important because these mistakes weren't in the original manuscripts. But he has never seen those original manuscripts, but believes this must be the case. I was mentioning last night, I don't suppose Hammond wants it repeated on his videotape. I was mentioning last night, and most recently I'd come across a reference in, and now I don't think I have the exact chapter and verse, 1 Chronicles chapter 21, I believe. In any case, in this place it's talking about a certain King Jehoram, a king of Israel, and listen carefully. It says, Jehoram died when he was 40 years old, and so his son Ahaziah became the king. He was 42. So the son is 2 years older than the father. Now, of course, normally you say, well, then somebody made a mistake somewhere. They wrote down the wrong number. Yes, no doubt. Because in another place it says that when this Ahaziah became the king, he was 22. So somebody just miscopied a number. But to some people, they will insist, no, both are correct. I had corresponded with a man who, he was telling me, he brought this to someone's attention. He said, I told this man, I said, look, it says here, the man died, he was 40, so they made his son the king, he was 42. And his response to that was, I fail to see any contradiction. So you can't reason, you can't get started under circumstances like these. In regard to this kind of thing, or people claiming, no, what I have is legitimate, there are no mistakes and so on, people used to say that a long, long time ago. And there was a claim like that made in the time of one of the biblical prophets, Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah is some few hundreds of years after the time of Moses, and a claim was made in the time of Jeremiah, and it made Jeremiah apparently angry. And so in his book, Jeremiah chapter 8 and verse 8, it says the people were claiming they were reading from the book of the Lord. They're doing like the fundamentalist does. They're reading their scriptures and proving points from it. And it says in this verse, how can you say, we are wise, and the law of the Lord is with us? But behold, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. So here's a complaint from within the Bible itself. That's hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They were the equivalent of fundamentalists. And a verse comes that says, don't tell me you have the book of the Lord. Some of the people who copied that down made it into a lie. The lying pen of the scribes. When it comes to, I suppose, the main issue, I suppose, between Christians and Muslims would be, of course, has to do with Jesus. What does the Muslim say of Jesus? What does the Christian say of Jesus? And this may be a delicate point, but I'd like to stress that, in a certain sense, the main issue with the Muslim, just as in virtually any other case in the Quran, the issue is not whether Jesus was divine. The issue is whether he said he was. See, when the Quran challenges people who make claims, it says, bring your proof. It's not so much a denial of the claim, say, oh, that's wrong, as to say, if you're going to say that, bring the evidence. Where is your authority for that? So that you don't get very far if you're simply in a discussion or argument of some kind, a Christian saying Jesus was divine. No, he wasn't. The discussion is first, before that place. Christian says he was divine. You say, how do you know that? Did he say that? Where did you find the place that he claimed this? Before I can argue with you about it. And so they play a number of tricks. And they quote from some of the words of Jesus to try to prove this point. And they play an interesting game. There are 4 stories of the life of Jesus in the Bible, the so-called Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You won't find those names anywhere. Those are, well, you don't find them as titles of the book within the book. Those are names people have stuck on them. They say, well, there was somebody named Matthew, he wrote this, but they're anonymous documents. These 4 accounts of the life of Jesus, they quote him. 4 of them. But if you ask the question, show me where Jesus claims he is divine, they cannot point to anything in Matthew or in Mark or in Luke. They have to go to John before they can even get started. It seems interesting that out of these 4 choices, they still have to target the one. As you find it in any Bible, they are in the New Testament, they're listed in that order: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. If you're handed biblical or evangelical literature saying, become a Christian, learn this, and so on, they tell you a few things to do, and then they tell you, and read the Bible, start with John. So they're, in effect, telling you, skip all this part here of the Old Testament, this much. You get to the New Testament, skip the first 3, and start reading there. See? Because that's the only place they can begin to say, oh, here it looks like he made this claim. And so I can just cite a number of these as an example. Again, as I say, I don't expect that you carry all these things away to make use of them. I'm just illustrating how it can be done. As an example, they look to the 6th chapter, 41st verse. And in this place, we read Jesus saying, I am the bread that came down out of heaven. And then he goes on to compare himself to the manna that came to the Israelites in Moses' time, that they would find this bread on the ground. He said, I am the bread that came out of heaven. So they say, you see there? He said he came from heaven. It's like the bread that came from heaven. But think about it, or look into it. If you look in the story in the Bible of where did this bread come from, it's in the book of Numbers, verse 9. This bread out of heaven, it says it formed on the ground. It doesn't say they cooked it in heaven and the angels brought it down. It says it appeared, it formed on the ground. It came out of heaven in the sense that this is the command issues, let this be. It comes out of heaven in that sense, as anything else would come out of heaven. So they're trying to, and every Christian knows that, because you ask them, did the manna, was it made in heaven and they were sent to earth? Well, no. Well, then, don't read this verse and say, because Jesus says he's like the manna, that he came out of heaven. He really was in heaven, and he came down and formed on the earth, I guess. In the 3rd chapter, this is the favorite one, John 3:16. Often, if you watch a baseball game on television, you see the camera looks in at the batter standing there, and you see some of the people in the stands behind him. There'll usually be somebody holding up a sign that says John 3:16. He's trying to get the audience to see, John, what does that say? And then he's going to look this up. This is the most important Bible verse somewhere. They buy a seat so they can put this on television across the country. At John 3:16, it refers to Jesus as God's only begotten Son. And so they say, there you have it, his only begotten Son. But in fact, some Bible translations at John 3:16 don't translate that word only begotten, because they realize the difficulty that gets them in. In another book a little further on in the Bible, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17, you find the same word in the Greek language, in the translation. The same word they're translating as only begotten. And it says that Isaac was Abraham's only begotten son. Well, as the Christian knows, he never was. He had an older brother. At no time was he Abraham's only begotten son. So whatever that word means, it doesn't mean only begotten in the usual sense that you think of it. It must mean something else. There must be some information we're missing. We can't just bring this out and force this translation on it. Another example is in the 10th chapter of John. In this place, and this too is another favorite, it says that the Jews were listening to Jesus speak, and then they suddenly picked up stones, and they were going to stone him. And why were they going to stone him? It says because they thought he was making himself equal to God. And so the Christians said, you see there, the Jews were right. This is what they understood him to say, and so they picked up stones. They were going to kill him because he claimed to be equal to God. Well, what does Jesus do on this occasion? Does he run and hide or